If you've ever thought about creating a high-ticket program or want to be creating a high-ticket program, then this is the episode for you. I am delighted to be joined by the wonderful Erica Nash. Erica Nash works with coaches and course creators to design high-ticket course and group coaching programs that are filled with over-the-top value and create a path to more clarity, impact, and revenue. She is a sucker for strategy, and a good spreadsheet brings her a ridiculous amount of joy. But most of all, she just really loves education and recognises the need for efficient, equitable programs. There is absolutely loads to cover in this episode, so grab a notebook and pen and get ready to make notes, because what you are going to learn about and what we're going to talk about is going to be an absolute game changer to how you create your online course. Welcome to Bloggers Creating Courses, the podcast which will take you behind the scenes of creating an online course. I'm your host, Verity Songon, founder and education consultant at veritysongon.com. I'm so excited to help you create an online course that you are proud of and to be part of your journey to scale your business as an online course creator. Let's get into the episode. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Erica. I am really, really excited to have you on. But before we jump in, we have got so much that we're going to talk about, and there is so much value to what we're going to talk about as well today. And I can't tell you how excited I am. But first of all, I'm going to hand over to you. Tell me about you, what you do, what your business is. Just tell me all the things about you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to get to talk with you. So like you said, my name is Erica, and I'm a 6- and 7-figure course designer and strategist. And so I help coaches design courses that are highly engaging and really are set up so that students are, getting results faster, more likely to cross the finish line. They create like this, great ROI for the course creators as well, because they're getting, they're spending less time answering the same questions over and over. Students are getting, they're not getting stuck in those same places where it's like constantly they're having to readdress specific things. They get peace of mind, confidence, clarity, and then ultimately like a higher revenue. Usually coaches that work with me after we're done, they get to raise their prices by like 50 to 100%. So they're creating higher revenue for themselves, more social proof, creating super fans because their students are like totally bought in to their framework and their systems. And they're like, yes, this works. So like they keep buying from these coaches and then create referrals. So they're helping to grow the community, and just, it's a win-win for everybody all around. It's fantastic.
Absolutely. That sounds so exciting and so interesting as well. And I would also recommend that anybody who is interested in taking notes from this to grab a pen and paper now, because there's going to be so much that you're going to be able to take away from this episode. I'm going to just ask, how did you get into what you do though? What was kind of like your journey that got you here? Because it's a pretty bespoke niche, I guess, in a way that's landed you here. So how did you get there?
It really is. Yeah. And the long of it is that everything I have done in my life, I feel like has led me up to this point. My specific framework and system that I work within is very bespoke and kind of different from what other people do. And so really the gist of it is that I used to be a teacher. So I taught for a decade, and I love learning. I'm such a geek. I nerd out over like all of the things education. I truly believe in, the power that education creates and just like how people can change their lives with the right content and maybe unlock things that they, never would have been able to before, and, creating that accessibility for lots of people. But within that, I love strategy, and I love all things design and creativity and all of that. And so I've taken all of those things that I have kind of been honing my whole life in creating illustrations since I was a kid, or just systems to make my life easier, and just seeing how strategic I can be about specific things to make them more efficient. All of those things have kind of influenced how I approach course creation. And then in my time as an educator, I was creating my own courses from scratch. I didn't work in a district that had anybody to create those things for you, and so I had to just do it myself. And then as somebody who loves learning, I of course bought all the online courses and did all the things, and really just saw an opportunity for people that were selling some courses, how they could structure them better, how, there were lots of things that were coming up, lots of common questions that I was able to kind of see solutions for. And so I decided to, kind of take a dive into that world, and it's led me here. So it's been a long journey, but a good one.
It sounds like a really interesting journey. And having that background, I know we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, but having that background as a teacher as well, and all of that experience must just be so, so valuable for both you and your clients. And
Yeah,
yeah, so much value there.
absolutely.
So, what we're going to be talking about today, as I said in the introduction, there is high ticket courses. And you spoke about this as well. You were saying that you work with people who are generating, 6, 7 figures, which is, mind blowing for some of us, I'm sure, or even a target for a lot of our listeners as well. But I'm going to ask, how do we define what a high ticket course is? What is a high ticket course?
So, I think a lot of people would probably try to attach a number to that and say it's anything above $2,000 or $5,000 or whatever. But I don't necessarily like to take that approach. Honestly, I think that a high ticket course is more about your specific audience. And so it's going to be, I define it as a high price for your specific audience. And so that might be $500. If your audience typically does DIY things and the most they've ever paid was $27 for a course, a $500 price point is going to be a little bit of a stretch for them. That's going to be, they're going to have a hard time maybe like seeing like, oh, wow, that's a whole lot more than what I've spent before. And so it might be $500, it might be $1,000, it might be $20,000. It just really depends on your specific audience. But the key part is that there's a high perceived value and possible ROI. So they are attaching, they're like, this is how much it costs, but here is why it costs this much, because you're going to get so much more out of this than the money attached to what you put in.
I think that's really interesting what you were saying about how just because it's a high ticket course, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily loads of money. Because I think sometimes when we talk about high ticket courses, we immediately think, oh my gosh, I've got to create something which is worth, like you said, $1,000, even $20,000. But as you said, and I think that's so, so important, it's about what is high value and high ticket to your particular audience. And I have to say, I've never actually really thought about it like that. So hearing that come from you, that's really, really powerful. And yeah, you're right. Sometimes we need to take it back to who our audience is and how they perceive what high ticket and high value is. How would you say that we define what a high ticket course is from other types of programs that our audience could buy?
So and this is for sort of lack of a better term, but like the low ticket programs, they tend to be sort of self-directed. There's not usually a whole lot of interaction with the course creator in those. Usually if there is, maybe it's like in a Facebook group or something like that, where they might pop in occasionally and answer some questions. But that's totally fair, right? Like it's not sustainable to be doing like weekly calls and like unlimited one-to-one feedback or something like that for a $27 course that you have lifetime access to. Like that's just not sustainable. And so we can't expect our course creators that are selling for 27, 47, whatever dollars to put in the amount of time and energy that some of these high ticket course creators are actually putting into. And so High ticket programs, like what I see typically, they teach the why, they teach the how, and then they give support for implementation. And that's huge, that support piece. And so, maybe it only takes like say a month to get through like the core curriculum. They're probably going to tack on another at least 5 months so that they have the opportunity to put these things into place, to experiment with things a little bit, and that they're able to get some feedback and get some coaching and get some support like as they go through and sort of really refine the system. The support in these programs, it's usually like weekly, like there's usually some sort of like weekly call or something like that. Maybe it's a couple of times a month, but it's not usually less than that. Usually it's pretty repetitive, pretty often. Most of the time it's also in a group setting, so it's not going to be a ton of like one-to-one, but it's going to feel like one-to-one in some ways. So there is this very particular way that they kind of go about, creating this group experience, but where you feel seen and heard and like loved and cared for, and like an important part of that community, where it's not like you're just kind of another notch in the income belt or whatever. Most of the time also there's limited access. Like it's not going to be a lifetime membership. It's going to be like, most of the time I see at minimum 6 months to a year. And then, they have to decide, okay, like, is this something that I want to reinvest in and continue going on? Or is this something that, I got what I needed and it's time to move on to, to something else. And then another really big important piece in these programs is the community. The community is usually incredibly active, and a lot of times they don't necessarily lean on the course creator for interaction. They are very much, sort of in line with the strategies and the framework, and they're able to kind of coach each other and support each other with those things. And then, of course, the course creators, they should jump in, but most of the times these communities are really strong in that way. And it's a huge factor when it does come time for memberships to be renewed, because if the community is really strong, it's really hard to leave that community if you've been in for a year and you're really close and you've been through all of this stuff together. They've coached you, you've become friends. It's really tough to leave. And so it's a factor that comes into play whenever they're considering renewals.
Absolutely. That's so powerful and so important, isn't it? Like you said, it's not just selling that course and being done with it. It's that support, as you said, what comes after it, and that community aspect. And building up the communities, as we know with online courses and programs, it can be challenging when starting out. But as you said, there is so much reward there for keeping people within that community from that long-term approach. Absolutely. If we've got listeners at the moment who are thinking, I want to go down this route, I want to create a high ticket course, or I'm in the process of creating a high ticket course and actually I'm not sure if I'm going in the direction, how would you suggest that listeners structure a high ticket program that they're creating or wanting to create?
So there are some pieces that I would suggest that they look at, and the structure itself, that's probably like a whole nother episode that we could go into on how to structure it and how to, how exactly to put all, get it all scaffolded and all of that kind of stuff. But there are some pieces that I definitely recommend putting into place. So there are 10 pieces. So the first one is to create sort of a hybrid program. There's a course with a coaching component. So that coaching doesn't have to be, one-to-one. In fact, I recommend that it be in a group setting, because in that group setting, you're really able to lean on you're able to lean on each other for support. It's not just one brain, even though, the course creator is kind of this expert. It's always great to have, other people sort of in the room and bounce ideas off of each other. And then it's good for feedback for the course creator to really kind of evaluate their program and make changes and implement it that way. Put in some sort of cap on your timeline. So how long is the membership going to be for? And, if you're going to do it for a certain period of time, really look at what is realistic for my audience to implement, to learn and implement this stuff and get support on it. Don't just randomly pick a number, but really know your audience to know exactly what it is that they need and what they need to be able to move forward successfully. It's super important to be able to say, okay, like this specific, if you set aside X number of hours per week, you'll get through this content in X number of weeks. Here's how, I can support you in that moving forward. And then give them time. It's so important to recognize that like not everybody lives the same lifestyle and that we are pulled in so many different directions. And maybe 2 hours a week is not realistic for, certain. And so it's just, so putting that timeline, but making it a realistic timeline is definitely something to consider. Having a component where there is live access to you. And so not necessarily in a one-to-one space, but having like regular live group calls is so valuable. And it's valuable to your audience because they can ask you questions directly, get coaching from you, or whatever it is that you're going to give them in that space. But this is so valuable for course creators as well, because this is an opportunity for them to see where there are gaps in their curriculum so that they can then go close those gaps and make their program even stronger. So questions are always a really, really good tool. Of course, they should always be welcome, but they are like, that gives you the opportunity to go strengthen your program so that you don't have to keep answering the same questions over and over and over. Because if one person is getting hung up on that, lots of other people are going to get hung up on that too. That's just the nature of it. And so in really creating this system of feedback, evaluation, revision, implementation, we're able to really kind of limit the number of obstacles. There's still always going to be obstacles, but we're able to really limit them and kind of then, okay, let's go tackle the next thing. So it just makes things move a lot faster. The next thing is going to be when you're looking at a program that, you want to make high ticket, it usually involves teaching strategy and then whatever that coach's unique framework or methodology. And so really it's not just about here's this info, here's how to do it, but it's here's how to do it within this specific framework that is proven to be successful. An engaged community, super important, which we talked about already. Opportunities for feedback. So almost like a sort of a homework system. You don't necessarily have to call it homework, but allowing for them to submit things to you so that you can look through what they're doing and see if they're interpreting your teaching correctly. Are they looking at this stuff the way that you anticipated that they would look through it? Or is there something that's being miscommunicated and they're approaching it in a wrong way? So that gives you the opportunity to really kind of catch those early on so that your system is working still. It's not like they're going to go in and they're going to put this into place and they're doing it wrong. And then they're going to come back and be like, well, this is not working. That gives you an opportunity to catch that. One thing that's super important is that all of this is autonomous and asynchronous, because again, we don't have like these lifestyles that all kind of work the same way. And so I hate when I see drip courses because it assumes that I have the same amount of time every single week or whatever, and that everybody in that course is like that and can go through this specific thing in this specific way, or that I don't already know those things. And so when we are able to kind of create a program that we can release at the same time and trust them as adults to go through and get what they need, then we're respecting them as learners, we're respecting what they already know and their ability to weed through what they don't necessarily need. Now, I mean, there's nuances to this, right? But there is a time and a place for just, here is everything, go ahead and tackle this as you need to tackle it. That's really important. And so making sure that it's very specific, very targeted, and then that it's accessible. And we've talked some about this before, that there is a real need for accessibility in the online course community as well.
Absolutely. And there's two things that I wanted to pick up on what you were saying there. First of all, about having your students submit things to you so you can gauge and you can understand their understanding. Because one of the features that I often see in online course platforms is around assignments. And so many people say to me, well, why do I need an assignment? I'm not teaching a diploma or something really official, quote unquote official or what have you. But as you said, an assignment doesn't necessarily have to be a 3,000 word essay, which is contributing to a qualification. It could be a worksheet. It could be, write me a paragraph about this, or show me some screenshots, or whatever's relevant to that course. So that might get people thinking already, well, actually, just because there is that assignment feature, that is really, really useful. And again, the other thing I wanted to pick up on was what you said about drip courses. Absolutely. I did a course myself. It was a little while ago, and I knew the first 3 stages of what they were teaching. So I kind of wasn't really getting into the program until maybe week 3, week 4, but I couldn't get there, and it was really annoying. And it actually kind of disengaged me, as opposed to another course which I did, because I'm a complete nerd out like you. I've just got to keep on learning. I love online courses. I love learning. Everything about this world is just in my brain, constantly wanting to learn. But again, drip courses, I did this other course and they just gave me all the information, and it was, oh my gosh, lesson upon lesson upon lesson. There was so much of it, but it really, really worked for me, because I kind of actually skipped the first couple of modules, but I didn't have to wait for a few weeks. I didn't get disengaged with the content. So like you said, there is a time and a place for drip courses, but I think that's something really, really useful and powerful for our audience to take away, and for listeners to take away, is that just because you've got the drip course feature doesn't necessarily mean that you have to use it just because you've got it in the package.
Right. Yeah. Well, and going back to what you said about it disengaging you, like that's exactly the risk that you run, is that and that's the worst thing that you could do in a course, is do something to cause your students to disengage, because that engagement is what moves them forward and helps them to see success, and their success is your success, right? And so when we do something like that and disengage, like that is detrimental. And if they're not engaged really early on, they may not come back. They may not finish, and that hurts all kinds of things. And so instead of doing that, drip course that way, but also you said that there was another one that was like had so much content, that's when we really have to be super strategic about what it is. Like, what is this course for? What is the goal? And how much can I pare this down? What can I completely get rid of that's not necessary? What information is the information that they need to know, and only that, to be able to reach the course goal? Because too much content can be just as harmful and disengaging as not enough content.
Absolutely. I think that's so, so important as well. And I know we talked about this previously, about almost brain dumping about a subject there. And just because you're teaching, I don't know, I'm going to pick knitting as a random example here, but just because you're teaching somebody how to knit in an online course about knitting doesn't mean that you need to brain dump everything you know about that, because that's not necessarily what your students need. And I think strategy. But one thing that I really want to move on to is all these things that we're talking about with a high ticket program. It needs a lot of involvement from a course creator. This isn't just we're going to create it, we're going to shove it on the internet, it's going to sell itself. It needs a lot of involvement from what I'm hearing. So could you talk to me a little bit about that kind of level of involvement that a course creator who wants to do a high ticket program, what can they expect?
Yeah. First, when it comes to a high ticket program, passive income is a lie. Like that's just not the way that it works. And so it takes a ton of time and energy to create a program like this. And then it takes just as much to sustain it. There's just a lot that you have to do. So when you have a high price tag, people are going to expect a higher level of access to your strategies, but also to you. And so it's also really important to create systems and SOPs so that things work seamlessly time and time again, and you're not, putting out sort of unnecessary energy, because otherwise you'll just burn yourself all the way out. It is just going to be super exhausting. And honestly, there's a reason why the course creators that I work with typically only focus on this one high ticket program. Like, it is their bread and butter, because it does take so much time and energy away. I mean, granted, they're probably working less than they would in a 40-hour a week job, but it's not like they're spending 1 or 2 hours a week and then everything else is running seamlessly. I mean, there's so much behind the scenes, and sometimes it requires extra hands and extra help as well. So, they have teams and all of that.
I really want to pick up on that point, because so often we go on the internet and we see so many things thrown at us of, I only work 2 hours a week and I've got all this passive income coming in, and I do it just selling one $27 course. And don't get me wrong, if you can sell a $27 course and you can make all of this money and you're only working a couple of hours, I salute you. I've got much respect for you, and good for you. But if it was that easy, everybody would be doing it and we'd all be millionaires. And I think what you've just said is so, so true. If you want, yes, okay, you probably will be working less than 40 hours as you would if you had your 9 to 5 or whatever. But on the flip side, you have to put in that effort. It's not just a case of I'm selling a course for, I don't know, 100, 200, 300, $20,000, whatever it is. You've got to put in the effort behind that, behind the creation, the continuity, the student interaction, the feedback, the follow-up. And I think that's a huge, huge message for any of our listeners today of, yes, high ticket programs are completely worth it. And a huge component is your business. Like you said, a lot of people run them and that is the only thing they sell. But you've got to be prepared to put the work in and put the hours behind that. I think that's so important. So I guess that leads me on really nicely to my next question. What takeaway message do you really want our listeners to take away from this episode today?
I think probably it would be that strategy is the most important piece of designing a course. I know that we briefly touched on brain dumping, but it's what the strategy is what takes that brain dump and turns it into a course that is going to really work and get students results. And so having that strategy is so important if you want to put a high ticket price. And that's not to say that other courses aren't really well designed and developed and are sold for really low prices. Like, that can totally happen. But it's extra important if you want to sell it for, really high prices for your specific audience. It has to be strategic. It just has to work.
I think that's a fantastic takeaway message. How can our listeners find out more about you? How can they contact you and find out what it is that you do?
Yeah, for sure. They can read a little bit more about me and kind of see some of my case studies and things like that on my website. I just released a program health assessment. It's just like a free sort of quiz that course creators can take to kind of see how their program is stacking up and give you some next steps. And all of that can be found at my website, which is ericanashdesign.com.
That's great. And I will link that down in the show notes as well so that people can find that. And you're also on Instagram as well. So I will pop that handle in the show notes as well. And then people can find you on there as well. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I have had so much fun. I've learned so much. My notebook is just made me pick up my pen so many times. I've just been jotting down so many things. And I think that our listeners are going to take away so much about high ticket programs, so much value in what we've discussed. And as you said, it comes back to that work ethic and just prepared to put in the put in the time and you reap the reward, really, don't you? It's
yeah,
so
absolutely.
exciting.
Yeah, I am just really excited to be able to share and just see what what's possible.
100%. Well, thank you so much for your time. I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Bloggers Creating Courses. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, leave a rating and a review. Ratings and reviews help us to reach more people who want to build and scale their online course, so you're really helping to widen the support for our blogging community. To catch all of the latest from me, you can follow me on Instagram @VeritySongon. I'll see you next time. Happy content creating.